back then, it was, if you could follow the doctor's finger or the trainer's finger, that was pretty much, okay, you're ready to go back in.
That's Jim McMahon here. Many remember him as being a Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Bears, of course. He suffers from dementia, and a lot of other players have very significant cases. Others, though, conditions bad, but they have many years ahead of them. There's already been objections to the settlement with more than 5,000 players attached to it. Some saying the number wasn't enough. In fact, the court even agreed with that, saying that the number probably wasn't sufficient enough. But there's a real quandary going on here. The Times says the decision about whether to accept or reject the deal will present that moral quandary. Should the players accept a limited settlement so that people like Kevin Turner, one of the people, can get help quickly, because in many cases they're in a very rough way right now and they need funding right away to get quality care? Or conversely, should they fight for something better and perhaps slow the distribution of payments to those in need? And Sean Morey and others, they fall into that category. And Doug, you've been involved in a lot of large suits here. Not all needs are the same when it comes to people that have been affected. You've dealt with people with mesothelioma, and some of them are very acute, and if they can get any peace of mind in their remaining time on earth here, the sooner that they get the money, the better. While others face 20, 30 years of life with a condition, and the larger the settlement, the more the quality of life over an extended period of time will be handled. You have good friends, former teammates with each other, who don't see eye to eye on this. A guy with ALS needs it today, while a guy that has concussions and maybe not the onset of dementia, he knows that he's got longer, that he's got to figure it out. How, take me behind the curtain, how do these conversations go?
Well, I mean, everything you said is exactly what they're talking about. You have lawyers that are representing different parties with different needs. That's why they file their objections. There are probably players with a lot of money that are doing this just because, they're entitled to the money. Other people that really need the money. It's a real difficult process, and behind the scenes you're going to hear a lot of different opinions, a lot of different voices, and it's really just, it's a fight, really. And ultimately, you just kind of hope you get to the right decision. And oftentimes, nobody's happy, and they're just kind of satisfied is what you can be, hopefully at the end, that's what you'll get.
Because the dirty secret is, it's one thing to win, but it's another thing to see the money, right? And everybody knows this that are adults in this process. So the idea that we'll give you something may not be as big a settlement as you wanted, and you might even be able to get more if we drag this thing out. But time isn't on the side of a lot of these guys. I mean, this spans a long generation of players here. Recently retired guys versus guys who played of an earlier generation, which clearly didn't get proper medical care or advice. How do you mitigate that?
Well, that's a difficult conversation that many lawyers have to have with their clients, because these people, obviously, money will never fix what's going on for a lot of these people. And a lawyer sometimes has to tell them that their expectations have to be in line with the case. And a case like this, if you tell a lot of people say, I just want to go to trial, I want the jury to hear this, I want the maximum. Well, then you have to tell them the consequences, that this could be years in the future, and ultimately you may not get what you think you're going to get. And that's a difficult conversation.
It's tough, right? Because also it's the families too, right?
It's very tough, but remember, the people who don't need it that much now know that in years to come they very well may be that desperate, and to take too little, or it's not only the amount, but there were other terms that were objectionable. But the one thing that nobody's talking about here, and I read it and I'm assuming that during the last collective bargaining agreement, tens of millions of dollars were put in there and offered to the union to take care of people like, I think, Kevin Turner, that needed it now, and the union rejected it out of hand. I mean, there was a proposed solution. You feel bad for everybody, but you can't expect some people to give up what they would later need.
And this is for every civil case, isn't it? Where you have some member of the family even who says, oh, we should hold out for more. And then somebody else says, I want to see the money now. And then you have all the different agendas, let alone competing interests.
Absolutely, but when you look at this, if you were looking at a medical malpractice case and you had someone who had cancer, you'd put that person on an expedited calendar because the chances of them living through the end of the case, if it went at its normal pace, would be diminished. So really what they could do is have two classes of people here, and you'd have one class, almost like with Lotto. If you win, do you want to take the payments up front now, or do you want to take it
Lump sum or
longer?
take it over 20 years, yeah.
Absolutely, and so there are ways to get around this.
We'll wrap things up and come back.